Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
Welcome to this week's show. We are continuing our series of interviews with industry experts, innovators, inventors, technology licensing experts, and analysts. And today's guest is an industry analyst who I've known for many years. He covered the work that I was doing at HP over a decade ago, very well known in Silicon Valley. Today's guest is Rob Enderle. He is the president principal analyst for Enderle Group. Rob works with a variety of technology companies. He's worked with HP, Dell. We talk a little bit in the show today about auto manufacturers. He does work and was the launch analyst for Jaguar and a number of other technologies over a very long and very successful career. So Rob and I cover a whole wide range of topics. We talk about vehicles. He's a big car guy. We talk about digital twins. We recently had another conversation here on a previous episode on digital twins. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. It is becoming an interesting topic, and it's getting a lot of press here. Recently, we talked about a wide range of things around collaboration technologies, communications technologies, mobile technologies, PCs, but more importantly about convergence. All of these innovations collapsing down on each other. And it's a common thing we see in the innovation space about standalone innovations converging, coming together. Things that you wouldn't think to get matched up. Those are great avenues for new innovations. It doesn't have to be something new you invent. It could be just combining two things that are out there and bring them together when we talk about that. So don't want to wait anymore. We want to hop into this episode. But before we do that, got that favor to ask. Follow, like, and share. Follow us on social media. Like this episode. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a rating wherever you get this podcast, and share. If there's other people who you think would benefit from hearing today's show, share it with them. Let them know about it. Send them the link. Send them the link to the show notes over at killerinnovations.com. Greatly appreciate that. And with that, let's jump in to this week's episode. So, Rob, it's been a while. We were talking, last week or 2 weeks ago, trying to catch up, and I thought it would be great to have you come onto the show and we can kind of record the discussion rather than you and I just kind of catching up. And as I shared with you before we started the recording, I've hit the trifecta. Now you're on the show. I've had Ben Bajaran on the show, and I had Bob O'Donnell. So you're the three horsemen when it comes to the leading Silicon Valley analysts, the ones that I engaged with pretty heavily when I was at HP, and always valued the fact that you guys are much closer to some of the trends and shifts and things that are happening. I thought it would be just a great conversation on the show. So what have you been up to? You've actually moved. You're no longer living in the Valley. You're in lovely Bend, Oregon.
Yeah, it's kind of great. We got tired of the drought conditions in California, and what finally did it for me was we nursed this big tree back to health in our backyard, which we turned into a garden. And with the drought, it went into shock and it died. And that plus almost getting killed in front of my house kind of soured me on the area. And so we originally were going to build a house in Belize, and that development turned out to be the biggest fraud that the U.S. government had ever run into. I was one of the first to flag it, so I got my money back, and then we took that money, bought the house in Bend, rebuilt it, so there isn't a single wall, ceiling, roof that we haven't touched, but it's the same square footage, and then dropped a 3,600-pound dragon out front to call it our own.
Yeah, well, I you sent me the picture of the dragon. I couldn't quite envision what kind of a dragon. That thing is massive.
It's massive.
That
Yeah,
thing
it was at CES at the Bellagio in Las Vegas, and I bought it for $21,000, and I shipped it out here, and now it's our immobile pet.
Yeah, well, I can imagine your neighbors loving that, or the kids probably love it at Halloween, right? It's
good.
It's the statue that everybody loves to hate on Halloween, right?
Yep.
So, Rob, your background, you've covered a wide range of companies. You engage with a large number of companies, technologies, things. What have you been writing about lately? What have been some of the more recent articles and thoughts that you've been sharing with your clients and out there in the world right now?
Well, one of the more interesting areas is this birth of the metaverse, and I've been kind of dovetailing with what's going on in Ukraine, and talking about how in the future, if there is a war or a disaster of some kind, once the buildings and structures are scanned into the metaverse, even if the city, your hometown, your home was demolished, you'd have an ability to go back, at least virtually, and experience those places the way they were when you were young. I don't know about you, but when I grew up on an orange grove farm, orange grove ranch, and the orange grove now is gone. The whole area has changed from what was an agricultural area in Tustin, California, and now it's almost all industrial. And so it kind of feels like where I grew up is gone. With the metaverse, and I'm sure this is true of the folks that will be going back to Ukraine, hopefully when the war is over, they're going to find that the place that they grew up in, the place they loved, has disappeared. But if those buildings were properly photographed, and many of them were, they can be turned into metaverse elements, not digital twins per se, because the digital twin requires the physical structure to remain in existence. But at least a representation that they can go back in, they can see the way it was, and can experience the world the way they remember it, and maybe reminisce a bit, where otherwise that it would just simply be gone.
Well, that's an interesting concept, because everybody's trying to figure out, what is the winning use case for the metaverse, right? You've got, Zuckerberg's out there, talking metaverse up, changing the name of the company even. It's a term that's been bounced around, and people are still kind of, how's it going to play out? What's the use case that really is going to cause people to say, I need to be involved in that. I gotta be engaged. That's where I want to spend my time.
Well, the way it's been used now, and the big initial test was the factory that was built by BMW in Germany, or process of being built, I guess. Is for simulation. Yeah. It's being used heavily in training autonomous cars. Now moved to autonomous robots, and the idea, of course, if you train in the metaverse against digital twins, and let's be clear what digital twins are. A digital twin is a virtual representation of something where that something remains connected to it. So it's not like a twin human, where when you're born, the twin brothers, using brothers as an example, get different experiences and they diverge. A digital twin remains a twin throughout its existence. You have to instrument the digital twin so that instrument the physical twin so the digital twin goes through all the changes the physical one does. And that allows you to run simulations using full physics in the metaverse. And then any accidents occur, any problems that occur, they occur in the virtual world. And then you take that training and you adopt it to whatever you're doing in the real world. And those robots, those autonomous cars, now without putting any pedestrians at risk or drivers or passengers at risk or people walking around robots at risk, now can function in mixed environments with a much higher degree of safety.
Yeah, but it's not the description that Zuckerberg used for the metaverse. And if you watch the Facebook videos trying to talk about and promote the metaverse, it's almost like it's truly almost the virtual world kind of a thing, right? Where you put your avatar into this, simulated virtual world type of an experience.
Well, that's kind of where some folks are going to try to take it. So you could argue that the metaverse can also be a gaming environment where you're into an artificial world without the digital twins used for something different. But you'd ask where it's being successful right now.
Yep.
And that's why I pointed out how it's being used for simulation for robots and the rest. You could kind of argue a gaming environment like, what I play, City of Heroes, is kind of like a metaverse, but it doesn't have the level of reality that I believe people are proposing for the metaverse, where it becomes hard to distinguish between what's real and what's virtual.
Right.
And then you could do things like overlays. You could overlay the metaverse using some type of an AR construct and glasses, and you could walk. Well, you did what was the game that you did when you were at HP? I always mix it up with.
It's Roku's Reward is the name of the game.
Roku's Reward. For some reason, I always want to call that Ashman's Call because that game came out about the same time. So when I'm looking at it, I get the name wrong. But that's the underlying concept. Then you could take the metaverse and you could overlay the real world, use an AR interface, and you could experience something very different. The demonstrations that were really compelling at CES maybe 3 years ago, where they took the windows on the car and they made them into screens. And then when you were driving, instead of seeing buildings and other cars and stuff, you'd see dragons you were riding with. You'd see castles. You'd see it would look like you were actually riding to something else. But those representations would have overlays on the real world and be static. So the person in the car next to you would see that same, if they wanted to see the same thing. They could see the same thing, and then you could kind of have virtual battles. Hopefully, the car is driving itself at this point. Otherwise, it's going to be trouble. But you could have these major battles fighting, together if you're all traveling together. Remember those long road trips? I don't know if you took them when you were a kid, but I did, where you kind of got bored after a while. This wouldn't be boring at all. You and the kids 3 cars back could be fighting dragons in the air out of your car, and competing for kill rates or teaming. Against the demons, so it's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, well, and it's an interesting. I was just thinking about kids, or in my case, my grandkids. Literally giving them screen time without it being screen time. I guess is
right.
It's one way to think about it. But I love the idea on the metaverse teamed up with digital twins. We just recently had a show with Tiffany talking about and he's ex VP at Microsoft, and he's big on digital twins, and so we had just recently talked about talking about digital twins for the audio industry, having a physical car, your 2018 Ford F-150, and there's a digital twin that Ford has, and therefore they can run like new simulations of even crash testing or part replacements or recall situations, and they run those on the digital twins, and therefore they can identify the specific cars that are going to have the issue, because it's this combination of this connector to this coupling, and it's that combination that's causing the issue versus having blanket recalls and those kinds of things. I think the digital twin. Now, the question I've got, though, and you mentioned this a little bit on the metaverse, right, is fidelity. How real is it? And therefore, does the metaverse plus digital twin, what kind of fidelity do you really need to have to make it useful for decision making?
Well, you need high. If you're training robots and autonomous cars, you need very high fidelity, because the robot has to learn to discern the real life item, and if you don't have enough fidelity, the robot might not recognize the item you trained it for once it gets into real life. Plus, you're working with fairly tight tolerances, and so you don't want to have it dropped into an environment it was trained for, and something that was seen in one place that's physically static now is someplace else, because then the robot's going to get confused and you might have an accident or a collision.
Right. Yeah, and it's the as you talk about using kind of the metaverse, with a digital twin as part of a training with autonomous vehicles.
Right.
And one of the things that I've been surprised about when you look at, like, if you stack all 3 of those together, the amount of data that you've got to move around on, like, updating the autonomous vehicles. So the autonomous vehicles got the latest information on the most improved training. We talk about situations where people pull into Silicon Valley and everybody plugs their car in at the same time and
blows up the transformer.
Right, it causes a brownout, right? we see the same thing actually in broadband networks. Everybody comes home and everybody's cars attaches to the network, and it's trying to upload all of its data because it's the collective wisdom of the hive of all the vehicles, and then pushing down all that data back into the car for its, for its updates. So it's, there's people I don't think have an appreciation of how much data is getting generated or how it's being used.
Yeah, it's, the data requirements are massive, and the fact that a lot of this stuff has to happen fairly real time. So if something moves, especially if you're talking about an autonomous car that's moving around 65, 70 miles per hour, it needs to know that it's got a problem and enough time to avoid the problem, because you still have to deal with physics. The car can react fast enough, but if it doesn't see the danger soon enough, it doesn't matter what the car tries to do. It's ballistic. It's going to continue on the path it is, because you've got to deal with real world physics.
Well, you get Newton's law of momentum. You don't stop instantaneous. There are certain laws of physics you just can't violate. Do you have an autonomous? I mean, do you have an EV?
I do. Okay. I have a Jaguar I-Pace. I had one of the first Jaguar I-Paces that came into the United States. I was one of the launch analysts for the car, and I sit as on the advisor council for Jaguar. It was all as a result of Dell doing the launch event for Jaguar, and they designated me one of the launch analysts. So it was kind of fun. Ended up buying the car.
Well, I'll tell you, like where I work, I don't know, we had to actually double the number of EV charging stations in the parking lot. So I think we're up to like 15 or 20 spots, and everybody assumes I have one, and I don't. I have Ford Explorers. And Ford, when I bought my Ford, I have two Ford Explorers, and when I bought them, they didn't have them as EV options yet. Even then, I guess I could buy my Mustang. I guess if I wanted my Mach-E Ford Mustang, that could be fun. I guess. But
the funny thing about the Mach-E is the performance version of the Mach-E actually underperforms where you'd want it to overperform against the base model. They've screwed something up with that car. The performance specs just don't look right to me. It's a good looking car. We've got a couple of them around me.
I haven't even taken a look at it, albeit my family, we are a pure Ford shop because my uncle owned and operated Lincolns and Ford dealerships in the south side of Chicago, Northwest Indiana. So guess what? You didn't have a choice. Everything's a Ford. Everything's a Ford in our family.
Have you seen the drag race between the Ford Raptor, the Rivian, and the Dodge? I think the Dodge truck was, but the high performance, I think it's the one that has the Viper engine in it. The drag race. The Rivian beats the Raptor, even pulling this to the quarter mile, even pulling another truck. It is really pretty sad, because as you probably know, the Raptor is their high performance pickup. They went to a turbocharged 6 though this last year, and both the Dodge and the Rivian just toasted it. But the Rivian toasted it, pulling another truck, which was fascinating.
Well, I think it is. I remember when the original prototype of the Tesla, even before Elon got involved in it.
The sports car.
Yeah. And you'd see that tooling up and down Page Mill or down University Avenue or something there in Palo Alto.
You ever ride one?
No, I didn't. I've talked to people who did get in, who did have a ride in one, but from what I heard, like the coming off the line on that thing was pretty intense.
Oh, it was real intense, but it was incredibly noisy because no insulation on the car whatsoever. And the base car they use is known for having a whole lot of rattles, but you don't really hear them because of the engine. Well, in the electric, no engine noise. And so all you hear is all these rattles coming from all around the car, like they didn't bolt things on solidly enough while you're driving. And yes, the acceleration is pretty amazing. But the new Teslas with, what's the one step above ludicrous mode? Those things will throw you in the back. It's like 2.8, 2.60 to 60s. That's insanely fast. I mean, that you can dust most of the high performance cars on the road with that thing to the quarter mile.
Yeah, well, it's just also the danger of it, right? It's that feeling of the need for speed definitely getting satisfied. But yes. I think KB, who I don't know if you ever met, she used to be an EVP at Edelman. She's the chief communication officer at Cruise. there in the city. The GM EV vehicle, and I've stayed in, and KB's given me some insight on Cruise and what they're doing. Now they're doing something different. It is really about an alternative business model where you don't own the vehicle, right? You basically quote lease a vehicle, but you just schedule it, and a vehicle shows up, no driver required. You get in, and it takes you from your house to your work. You get out, and then that vehicle gets used by other people throughout the day, and then another completely different vehicle comes and picks you up at work in the evening and takes you home. And it's kind of changes the whole concept of owning, things like transportation.
Yeah, it's this interesting thing we've got coming with regard to autonomous cars is that there are two modes. There's the chauffeur, which is what you're talking about, and there's guardian angel, and the industry is kind of torn on this, and I'm not sure why, because Toyota initially pointed out that thought most people are going to want guardian angel, and guardian angel is what you get from pretty much every autonomous car for free, no subscription. But if you want to enable chauffeur where the car does itself, even if you own the car, you're going to have to pay a monthly fee to get that particular feature, and that's where you don't drive the car at all. Most of the drivers I've spoken to, and clearly the forums I belong to, I'm also a moderator for one of the United States Jaguar forum. They don't really care for chauffeur at all. They like the idea of the option if they're going on a long drive, but for the most part, people buy performance cars. They want to drive them. They don't really want what's the point of buying a Ferrari if the Ferrari is going to drive you? And Ford looked at that and said, well, if that's the way we're going to go, then we're going to go into the car rental business, much like GM is with Cruise, and you'll get a subscription, and you won't own the car. But the buying public has rotated over to that. They still think they want to buy and drive cars, and nobody's done the marketing to convince people that hey, you really don't want to drive cars anymore. People that are buying these, especially cars like Jaguar, Mercedes, they're buying them because they want to drive them. So we've got a problem in the industry right now with regard to how we're going to position this technology so that we'll do it. Now, Guardian Angel, I always think of it as you remember those children's seats that had the steering wheel in them that weren't connected to anything?
Yeah.
That's kind of how Guardian Angel works. You're driving, and as long as you're taking the car in a safe direction, then everything seems like it's all connected. But as soon as you do something stupid, the steering wheel disconnects, the car takes over from you and keeps you from having an accident. So take, for instance, that accident we had a few weeks back where the 13-year-old kid was driving the pickup, front tire pops, he loses control, drives into a school bus and carries a lot of people. Well, as soon as that tire popped, the system would immediately take over the steering, freeze it so it didn't swerve and try to miss the accident, and would do it in milliseconds. And so the accident wouldn't occur, but the driver would be completely disconnected from the process. The car would go into we need to go into accident prevention mode, and would keep the accident from happening.
Well, I think the challenge, particularly here in the United States, is as Americans, we love our cars.
We do.
I mean, it's going to be a hard shift. Now, quite honestly, I think like my wife, she doesn't really get into driving, go long distance. She's fine with letting me do all the driving. I like to drive, right? So I think there's going to be a segment, but I think it's a change in culture that's almost going to be required. If you're thinking about, I'm going to rent a vehicle, I'm not going to have insurance, I'm not going to have to worry about getting the car washed, I'm not going to have to worry about oil changes or tires or any of that. I'm going to rent the vehicle for what for when I need it. Now, it would have been great during, the 2 years of COVID, since my car sat in the garage and twice the battery died on it because so infrequently I started the car to go anywhere. But I think it's a bigger change than people think. I think people really love their cars.
Yeah, the metaphor is probably an elevator. If you go into an office building, go to an apartment building, you pay for the elevator as part of your rent, and that's what moves you up and down through the floors. You don't have unless you're in a penthouse, you don't have your own elevator. And I think that's probably if we truly go to the chauffeur method of autonomous cars, that's what it'll be like. We'll just have horizontal elevators. The cars stop being cars, and then just become a place to move from a thing to move from place to place. And you'll have entertainment inside. You may have soda fountains or drinks or whatever. That's all part of the overall service. And then the car will just be there when you need it and take you where you need to go. And you can work and drink, watch TV, play video games. whatever you want, and you're completely decoupled from driving. But we're not there yet. I mean, the buying public isn't there yet, and it's probably going to take a while. Probably be generational.
Yeah, I think it will be. I think, like my kids, they're in their late 30s, getting ready to cross into being 40, and I think they're going to be in that that mental mode of that maybe something they do. But I think my grandkids, I don't think I think they are going to be that generation. But it is amazing at how fast the work on autonomous vehicles is progressing from where it was a decade ago to what it is now, and then what you see new coming out every year with the software updates to vehicles that are already on the road. It's crazy.
Well, we got our first level 4s in 25, and then a better level 4 in 26, and then in 2030 we get to level 5s. And remember, level 5s are probably more gated on regulation than they are gated on technology.
So help the audience understand, when you say level 4 autonomous vehicle and a level 5 autonomous vehicle, describe the difference.
So level 4, you still have a steering wheel. It will drive autonomously on most city roads and freeways, but it won't drive off road, and it'll struggle with anything that hasn't been mapped. Level 5 is you don't need a steering wheel. The car wherever you want to go, the car will take you there, and assuming the car can go there, that's level 5, and it switches, because when you're level 4, where you still have a steering wheel, there's still the sense that maybe the driver has liability for what's happening. As soon as you get to level 5, whoever made the technology carries. I mean, that's not clear, but the driver is disconnected, so that liability shouldn't flow to the driver.
Yeah.
Unless he does something negligent.
Well, and it's interesting, right? There's also been all these highlights of when, certain vehicles have been in autonomous mode or semi-autonomous mode, and then
Tesla.
And then accidents happen, and liability and what happened, and I think people have to remember, this is still an evolving technology, and it's going to continue to evolve, and it's never going to end, right? We're on this path now of autonomous AI assist. You could use autonomous vehicles as really being AI decision making. Right. So you're kind of crossing over some interesting, boundaries.
Well, and remember those systems that are having issues. They're level 2+ systems that are out there today. Tesla kind of oversold theirs as being autonomous. They called it autopilot. Remember, Consumer Reports had a cow about the name. I did. I don't know if you remember the old joke, but the old joke about autopilot was that guy came to the United States, rented a motorhome. He saw that it had cruise control and said, "Well, what's that?" And the dealer said, "Well, it works just like an autopilot." So he gets on the road, sets the autopilot, and goes back to the motorhome to make himself a cup of coffee. Well, clearly that ended badly, and so that was the joke. So and then Tesla comes out, basically takes their advanced cruise control and calls it autopilot. And then a bunch of people tried to use it as an autopilot, and died. It was the life imitating art kind of thing, which was so damaging.
Yeah. So let's shift topics here a little bit. I know over the years you also have been a big follower of the phone and PC world.
Yeah.
You were an analyst advising HP when we did the Palm acquisition and the PC laptop business, and you do a lot of work, I know, with Dell. I won't hold that against you.
Thank you.
But where's that going? I mean.
Well, let's go back a little farther. So I was the competitive analyst for IBM for telephony, and this was back when they owned Rome, and I hired into the Rome division, and IBM bought it. And the funny thing is we were doing convergence work back in the 80s. The Rome had cards that would go into PCs that would turn them into a hybrid phone machine. And they had a couple computers that were basically Macs. Well, they ran Windows, but they were basically looked like Macs that were phones and PCs integrated. And the stuff we could do back then, we still can't do today. For instance, we've got caller ID today, but back then in the prototype form, somebody called. I'd not only get the caller, I'd get their position in the company. I'd get whatever we talked about the last time they called, the kinds of interests they had. So when a call came in, even if I'd never met the person before, I would know on my screen immediately a whole hell of a lot about them. from inside the company. And if you've ever had that experience, like some call centers have that capability today, it really helps you engage in the call. But sadly, when all the telephony companies kind of went under, those efforts failed. And of course, the problem in that environment was the telephone companies and the computer companies had all the same acronyms. They just happened to mean different things. And so you get these executives talking to each other, thinking they were all on the same page, but they were so far removed from talking the same thing because they were assuming the acronyms meant something else. Anyway, it was a huge problem, not the least of which was that PBXs never seemed to age out. So you'd make that first sale, and then you go back to try to sell them another PBX, and it's like, well, no, mine's working just fine. I don't really need it. And you don't make another sale to a customer for 20 years. You're pretty much done. Yeah. But in any case, so that's really where my interest in convergence started. Recently, we've started to try to converge again. Cisco's aggressively now trying to move towards convergence on their side. HP, your old company, just bought Poly to attempt to try to bring these technologies together. Both Microsoft and Dell have tried to better integrate the smartphone and the PC. I think the Microsoft implementation may be a little bit better, but the same thing where you get your phone screen on your PC screen and you can interact with it directly, which is kind of handy, but we're still not 100% there where you can move from say, for instance, if I was on a phone call from you, it'd be nice to be able to hit a single button and be immediately into a Zoom call with you. Can't do that yet, but once we get to convergence, we'll be able to.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned, in fact, HP literally just announced yesterday the Poly acquisition, right? And it's been a lot of buzz and people asking about it. And I've had a couple of conversations with people, and I remind them, I said, people forget about the fact that HP, we actually sold, remember the old Halo collaborations? We sold the Poly.
I remember that big Halo rooms that was Marriott. Marriott was going to put in a whole bunch of those things. If people were going to pay money and do it, and I was, I'm not sure that's going to work. But anyway, they went to DreamWorks, and they had that table set up where you sit at the table, and the other end of the table was in New York, and you could have conversations across the table. But Jesus, the amount of money, I think it cost you $100,000 to put the system, $100,000 plus, depending on what the system was, up front, and then another $10,000 to $20,000 a month in service and support fees. And at that point in time, we didn't have a pandemic, and people really weren't using those systems that much.
Yeah, but I tell you, when you sat in a Halo room, it was completely
different. Awesome.
It was awesome. And in HP, we sold Halo to Poly. So when it was Polycom before they merged with Plantronics, right? And so now it's actually quite funny. You sell collaboration to Poly, and then you buy it all back with the pandemic and with the partnership that Poly has with Zoom. So I think that's going to be interesting on that kind of collaboration. But you think that convergence happening, the convergence with collaboration technologies, not just communications technologies. In fact, Brendan, who's the CTO at Zoom today, put out a big social media post on the expansion of the Zoom marketplace. All of the apps now that you can, everybody's got to have a market, right? Got to have an online app store or whatever. But it is interesting about all of these pieces, coming together, and it's one of those things like, it's like the old, when I was a CIO, centralized, decentralized, centralized, decentralized.
This conferencing stuff, the video conferencing stuff, I've been covering it, as I mentioned, since the late 80s, and it goes through these hills and valleys. Everybody gets excited and runs at it, then nobody makes any money, and it craters, and the market consolidates. Everybody gets excited about it. HP was on that second wave. Intel was on the first wave. And then and it consolidates and crashes. Now we're on the third wave of this thing. In fact, if we count the AT&T stuff in the 1960s, we're actually on the fourth wave of this stuff, and still hoping that people will find and use this as aggressively as was planned. And the pandemic certainly helped with that. But now we're going back to hybrid work or in-person work. You're seeing the drop off in interest again, and that's largely because we still haven't embraced the aspects of being in person that you don't get over video conferencing, the side conversations, the dinners, the social events, the other aspects that make you feel like you belong to the company. It can be done, but for whatever reason, we haven't been focusing on really managing the relationships that need to be built when people are remote. And the end result is folks are still gravitating back to person. I hate flying. So if we can just get this gosh darn video stuff to work, I'd be good.
Well, and that's an excellent point. We were having a conversation last week with some people around, and I've had this conversation with Eric Yuan, CEO at Zoom.
Yeah.
I said, and Eric's a sponsor that, Zoom has been a sponsor of this show now for 8 years. And we're big Zoom users. The one thing I continue to try to think about is how do you enable that serendipity conversation?
Right.
Casually you're walking through the office, you run into somebody sitting at their cube, and you're like, hey, what are you working on? And and it's not going to be one of those little stick robots weaving their way through an office. How do you really create a digital version of the casual conversation, of that serendipity, of a spark going off because you see somebody or you see something laying on their desk and you go, oh, you're looking at that? Have you talked to Bob over here? Because he's doing something similar. And hey, maybe we put these two projects together, whatever, right? You miss it. Like for me at HP, it was always the hallway to the HP Labs cafeteria in the bottom of Building 3.
I miss having lunches with people and all those, and maybe having dinner or get together for a game at night or watching movies together. And we've tried a lot of this stuff. What was it? Was it Netflix that had a deal where you could watch movies remotely with your friends, but time differences create problems, and people just aren't using the service. So it's really thinking through the behavioral aspects of this and the interpersonal aspects of this that we just have not yet done a good job with. We've got engineers focused on what is an interpersonal behavioral problem, and we're just not closing the gap.
Well, and it's interesting because, with COVID coming in, we've got 3 of our grandkids. They started off at the beginning of COVID living in Panama City, Florida. At the end of COVID, they now live in Joyce, Washington. But the way we've stayed connected with them particularly is through Facebook Portal. I've got Facebook Portal on the TV in the living room. So we do Friday night dance party with the grandkids. And like tonight, my daughter and son-in-law are doing something at the church. The kids are going to the church, but the kids will be online with my wife. So my wife is effectively doing a digital nanny while my daughter and son-in-law are in the very next room. So it's not like they're leaving the house and leaving the kids, but my wife is at 6:30 scheduled on her Google Calendar. She's doing digital babysitting, for the grandkids, right? And I think that's allowed, particularly during the pandemic, but now it's got a little bit of stickiness for those kinds of connections. But I think you're right. How do you solve the interpersonal? The social aspect of it? I was at this event in Indianapolis, 125 people in the room. People hadn't seen each other for more than 2 years, right? I mean, people were just so hungry to interact.
For interaction. Yeah.
Interaction. Wow, you're 3D. I see you in 3D, You're real. There's a shape to you. You're not a flat, digital image on a display someplace. And I think that those are, some of the, you think about, things like what was going on with Halo and other really, now you got the holographics, light field displays, a lot of work trying to recreate the environment, but it doesn't solve what I refer to as this serendipity effect, the non-planned conversation, the unplanned interaction because you run into somebody or you see them or you're sitting next to them at lunch or you happen to be sitting in a meeting and you got 5 minutes before. You can't have a one-on-one conversation in a Zoom meeting when there's 8 other people because whatever you say to the person next to you, 7 other people hear you, right? So you don't have that. So I think there's an opportunity to innovate on how do you solve that problem. I think if you could solve that, like you said, you and I were laughing before we started the interview today about, man, if I could not get on another airplane, I'd be a happy guy. Last thing I want to do is get on an airplane again.
Well, and what will really change some of this, I think, is when we finally get to human digital twins. The concept of a human digital twin, in fact, in NVIDIA at their GTC this last week was showcasing, and I got a chance to actually talk to Jensen about this, was showcasing a technology where the digital twin keeps track of your opinions, keep track of everything you write and do. It adopts your appearance, it adopts your voice, and the digital twin can act in your stead. And so if anybody wants to chat with you when you're not available, then rather than you appearing, the digital twin appears, looks just like you, behaves just like you, but it's got barriers around the data it can provide that limit personal information, limit corporate information if the conversation isn't connected to one of the two. So the user would have to be authorized to hear the information, but if they could hear both, if they were, say, your boss who might hear at least most of the personal information and clearly would have access to the company information, they could have a conversation with your digital twin that would be very similar to the same conversation they'd have with you. And then you'd get a summary whenever you woke up or came back from a trip or whatever of what happened. And then of course it creates some interesting dynamics. What if you die? What if you go to work for another company? What if for whatever reason you change jobs and your security classification changes, but the original digital twin isn't part of that particular process? We're going to have a bunch of things we're going to be working through as that comes forward, but it does promise the idea that might be able to have a case where you might have 20 digital twins and each one of them would have a job, and all you do is manage the digital twins, but you get income from each of the digital twins doing the work at various companies.
Well, you're talking about interactions. I had the CEO from Otter AI on the show. I don't know, it's probably got to be 5 or 6 months ago, maybe a little longer. And I've been using Otter AI ever since he was on the show to do automated meeting notes, take the audio from the podcast, put it through Otter AI to generate the transcript. It is, I remember the old Dragon days, trying to train Dragon to do transcription. I'm telling you,
horrible.
Otter AI is amazing. And once it learns a voice, like if I have the same 4 people in a call regularly every week and I have it do notes, it can automatically tag the names of every person making the comments. It is really, really amazing. And it's interesting when you have transcripts, meeting note transcripts.
With punctuation and emphasis now. It took us 20 years to improve those old Dragon tools, largely because the company that consolidated that market played some funny games with their stock and they were shut down. And that set us back a decade in terms of development. But now we're actually moving on this thing, and the translation software is a ton better than it used to be.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
Hey, transcription.
As we're running up on the clock here, I want to ask you, I've got one question and then we'll wrap it up. Question I want to ask you is what innovation do you see coming that's not here today that you are most excited about?
Not here today. Most excited about? Well, probably the thing that really has my interest right now, and it's kind of connected to that human digital twin, is digital immortality. This idea that you take what it is you are, you upload it into the cloud, and a version of you continues to exist forever. So your grandkids, their grandkids, their grandkids' grandkids, if they want to talk to their great grandfather, they can talk to them. They'd be around me. I don't know. There are people in my life that now that I'm an adult, I'd like to go and chat with again. Because when I was a kid and they were older, we didn't have the conversations that I wish I'd had now, because I didn't know how to ask the questions. I did not know how to ask for advice. And it'd be really interesting to go back. We have a lot of issues in politics about what the founders really wanted. Well, you could digitally recreate George Washington based on all that was written about him. And you could ask that representation of George Washington, I mean, what was it you were thinking at the time? And the computer would probably have a fairly accurate representation based on common knowledge and writings about the guy, or how he would respond. And so you'd have a lot of clarity with regard to politics. But in other ways, you could just kind of sit back and say, you're having a hard day at work, or maybe school didn't go well, and you want to talk to that parent that's no longer with you. You could have that conversation and perhaps get closure.
That is, I have to tell you, you're the first one to bring that up. We've had other guests on the show, and there's maybe some little overlap or whatever. You are the first one. You win the gold prize for the first one to bring up digital immortality. In fact, I had to write it down here because I want to research it now. Hey, Rob, thanks a lot for the time. If people want to follow your writings and keep up with your thoughts on what's happening, the trends and technologies, et cetera, what's the best place they can to read your articles, and where do you post at?
Well, I'm active on Facebook and active on Twitter. Most of the stuff I post up on Facebook and Twitter. Also, you can go to www.enderlegroup.com, and that contains a full list of everything I've published for everybody, the comments I've made in the media and that stuff. It's all on that website. And so it's kind of you can go there and find out everything that I'm writing about. I'm a generalist. My mentor at IBM said I would never advance unless I specialized, and I spent my entire career proving her wrong.
We'll have all those links in the show notes over at killerinnovations.com. So if you're driving in your car, you don't have to try to scribble down enderlegroup.com and remember that. So just hop over to Killer Innovations. We'll put the links and everything into the show notes. Rob, thanks for the time today. Greatly appreciate it. It's always a great time catching up with you. And thanks again.
All right.
Digital immortality. It's a concept that we talk about. You heard Rob just talk about it. I was really intrigued by it. Turns out Elon Musk just recently talked about this ability to upload personalities, memories, in a way that can be shared with future generations. So, Rob's answer to my standardized question, which is, what innovations are you most excited about, kind of threw me for a loop. I've heard about it, but I haven't really thought about it deeply. But now with 5 grandkids and me mentoring younger generation of young executives on their career path, finding a way where you can have that advice rather than me writing books or how many blog posts can I do or 18 years of pouring my experiences into this show. Are there other ways to get that ability to share your experiences, your lessons learned, things you would have done over differently if you had the chance? Interesting. Might be a future platform for sharing and a way to pay it forward with your own kids, grandkids, great-great-grandkids, and beyond. So something to think about. With that, thanks again for joining us this week. Greatly appreciate it. We know that you investing your time and spending it listening and hopefully benefiting from the show is I greatly appreciate that. It's why we've been doing this show now, starting its 18th year of doing this show. And hopefully you find it beneficial. We'd love to hear from you. Drop us a note. You can send it to phil@killerinnovations.com, or you can hop over to killerinnovations.com and hit the contact button and just drop it in that way. I'd love to hear from you, specifically if you've got questions you would want to ask. Maybe you heard something in today's show or something in a previous episode that you think you'd like to have more information on, or you've got an idea on it. Love to hear from you. So drop me a note. But also if you have a guest, if there's somebody that you read regularly or you follow them on Medium or Substack or wherever you consume your content from, and you think they would make a great guest on the show, love to hear it. You don't even need to know them. Just give us the name, point us in the right direction, and we'll go see if we can't secure them to come onto the show and share their expertise with everybody. So with that, thanks again. Have a great week. Take that idea that's noodling around in your head and make something happen and go change the world for the better. And with that, we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.